Oh, wow, man. That canine packs a punch.
That guy's gonna have a headache for a week.
Oh, absolutely. Every brain cell felt that blow.
So after a hit like that, what actually happens to his brain cells?
That's a good question. The brain's cushioned pretty well. It's surrounded by a cerebrospinal fluid. It protects it from sudden shock, kind of like an egg yolk surrounded by egg white. You can shake an egg and the yolk won't break. But with a canine hit like that, it's more than the cushion can protect. So the brain smashes into the skull, then bounces back and smashes into the opposite side of the skull. The first is called a coup, and the second one is called a contre-coup. It's the same as you'd see in concussions in football. And I can guarantee you there's damage to the brain.
Well, with that kind of damage, is it permanent?
There's a syndrome called dementia pugilistica, or it's like a Parkinson's syndrome. You'll probably recognize it as CTE in the football players. It begins just like what we saw here with repetitive blows to the head, but stopping the cell damage as fast as you can is the key.
You can stop the damage?
Yeah, you can, and here's how you do that. The concussion damage happens in 3 almost instantaneous and actually predictable phases. First, the fragile membrane around the brain cell is damaged and it begins to leak. Most importantly, the energy sources of the cell, the mitochondria, are damaged and they stop making energy for the cell and the entire cell stops working altogether. They start to leak these damaging free radicals in the form of what's called reactive oxygen species, ROS. And these are incredibly destructive.
What do these reactive oxygen species do when they leak?
Well, free radicals attack other atoms and molecules to steal their electrons, and that oxidizes them. It's like when oxygen starts to attack iron and oxidizes it, and it turns into rust. It just eats it away. Well, if that happens to be a molecule in a cell membrane, it can ultimately destroy that cell. When one cell is leaking these oxygen radicals and damages another cell, then that damaged cell begins leaking oxygen radicals. The damage continues cell to cell to cell. So it's like a self-perpetuating cascade of accumulating brain damage, like a chain reaction that just keeps expanding, destroying everything in an entire area of the brain. That's pretty much what just started in this boxer's head after canine just smoked him.
Is there just one type of free radical, or are there other types?
There are actually quite a few. Iron is a classic example of a free radical. Actually, most metals are notorious for becoming nasty free radicals.
Okay, so you're telling me that we have metals inside of our head?
Well, yeah. All cells have some metals like iron in them, and this gets released from a dying brain cell and then goes on to begin oxidizing the membranes of the adjacent cells, just like we talked about before. Normally, they're iron-binding proteins that trap that free iron, but not in the brain extracellular fluid, so the free iron radicals go crazy. And they join in the oxygen radicals and they continue the attack.
Oh my gosh, but we need iron. So isn't the hemoglobin in the blood mostly iron?
Yeah, but not roaming free in the brain's extracellular fluid. In fact, there's evidence that people with Alzheimer's disease have excessive iron deposits in the beta amyloid and the tau proteins. I would not be surprised if the extreme free radical damage to Alzheimer's brains could be due to free iron and probably other free metals like copper.
Well, okay, so it sounds like once the damage starts, it keeps on going. Or is there a way to stop this chain reaction, or at least stop the progression?
Yeah, I believe so. The free radical damage begins in the first few seconds to minutes after the injury. This boxer needs to load up on antioxidants ASAP to stop that oxidation process we talked about. Antioxidants will bind up or scavenge those free radicals from the damaged brain cells and hopefully limit the number of neurons killed.
What are some examples of some of these antioxidants you're talking about?
I like alpha-lipoic acid, CoQ10, PQQ, amongst several others. I put together an entire neurochemical protocol that addresses many of those destructive components of this encephalopathy because the brain damage, whether it's sudden like a stroke or head trauma, or repetitive like our boxer friend, or slow and unrelenting like we see in dementia and Parkinson's, these same destructive mechanisms are present.
What other mechanisms are you talking about? I thought we were just addressing free radicals.
Well, remember I mentioned 3 phases. Well, the first is this free radical attack. The second follows right on the heels of that, and it's the release of these neurotoxins from the neurons that are damaged and the astrocytes that are damaged. The astrocytes are the supporter cells of the brain. Neurotransmitters like glutamate and aspartate belong inside those cells, not squirting out of the damaged cells and killing off more cells. My protocol includes supplements that neutralize or block those neurotoxins. And we'll talk more about that later.
Okay, so that's 2 phases, but you said that there were 3 phases.
Right. The third phase that kicks in the first 24 hours after a brain injury or a stroke is inflammation. In this phase, the free radical attack we talked about a minute ago, release and they oxidize the membrane phospholipids that make up the membrane. This is called lipid peroxidation of the polyunsaturated fatty acids. The result is a conversion of these by phospholipase, which is an enzyme, to arachidonic acid that starts prostaglandin synthesis, and this cascades to synthesize leukotriene and cytokine.
And you lost me. You just had to go into the scientific words.
It really is complex. And there are lots of other aspects that go back to those darn reactive oxygen species. My neurochemical protocol addresses all of that as well.
So will our boxer's brain heal?
Oh, not unless he were to use my protocol as neuroregenerative and neurogenesis components. We can get to that another time as well.
Hold on, you just said neurogenesis. You mean to tell me that you can make new brain? Because that's what neurogenesis is.
Yeah, that's what the research indicates, at least up to a point. And remember, in a patient with a stroke, it's the same. In Alzheimer's, the phases and sequence of the phases are the same, just much more slowly over months and years.
Whoa, I gotta say, I'm looking forward to going deeper into these other phases and to learn more about this making new brain neurogenesis aspect. Clearly the fight is over and I've got to go home and try to digest all of this.
Okay, bud, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Doc, for the drink and for the neuroscience.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You pay for the beer, buddy.
I'll just leave it at the door.
Yeah, thanks.